On our 35th wedding anniversary cruise, I overheard my husband planning to leave me for my best friend. Not only did he casually dismiss my entire existence, but he did it with a laugh. I simply walked away. A silent fire burning inside. They had no idea what was coming. Stick around to hear my story unfold. Like and share, and let me know where you're listening from. The crystal chandeliers of the ship's grand dining room twinkled, casting a warm glow over the white linen tables. A string quartet played a familiar waltz, their melodies weaving through the polite chatter and clinking of silverware. Tonight, we were celebrating Arthur and my 35th wedding anniversary. A milestone that felt less like a triumph and more like a lengthy, exhausting performance. I smiled, raised my glass when prompted, and exchanged pleasantries with our friends, all while feeling a profound, unsettling detachment. 35 years. A lifetime, some might say, but for me, it had been a slowly unraveling tapestry, its vibrant threads fading into a dull, repetitive pattern. Across the table, Liam and Fiona, our closest friends, beamed at us, their faces alight with what appeared to be genuine happiness for our enduring union. Liam, dear, sweet Liam, clapped Arthur on the back. His laughter boomed as he recounted some old, shared anecdote. Fiona, however, was a different story. Her smile, while wide and seemingly sincere, didn't quite reach her eyes, and I noticed, with a prickle of unease that had become increasingly familiar over the past few months, the subtle, almost imperceptible ways her hand would linger on Arthur's arm a moment too long, her gaze holding his for an extra beat across the table. These weren't overt gestures of affection. They were more like calculated caresses, intimate touches disguised as casual friendliness. A secret language only I seemed to be privy to. My gut churned with a dull ache I had long tried to ignore. "I think I'm going to have to excuse myself," I announced after dessert, pressing a hand to my temple. "This rich food and the ship's gentle sway are giving me a bit of a headache." It wasn't a complete lie. A dull throb had indeed taken root behind my eyes, but the truth was, I needed air, space, and a quiet moment to unspool the tangled threads of suspicion that had been tightening around me. I needed to think, to process the uneasy feelings Fiona's presence invariably stirred. I murmured my apologies and navigated my way through the elegant room, past the couples dancing, the hushed conversations. My intention was to head to the open deck, to let the cool night air clear my head, but as I passed a secluded alcove just off the main lounge, shielded by a large, ornamental palm, I heard voices. Two voices, intimately low, unmistakably Arthur's and Fiona's. My steps faltered. A cold dread washed over me. A sickening premonition that solidified into certainty when I heard the unmistakable words. "This cruise has been the perfect cover," Fiona purred, her voice husky, closer than I had ever imagined it could be to Arthur. "Indeed," Arthur chuckled. A sound that usually brought comfort now pierced me like a shard of ice. 35 years. Who would have thought a celebration would be the best place to finalize our future? My breath hitched. My heart hammered against my ribs. I pressed myself against the wall, hidden by the shadows, unwilling and yet unable to move. "Are you sure about this, Arthur?" Fiona's tone shifted, a hint of concern, or perhaps feigned hesitation, in her voice. "Leaving them? Liam. Eleanor? Liam will manage," Arthur said, his voice dismissive, devoid of any genuine emotion for his lifelong friend. Then, those words, directed at me, or rather, about me. "She always does. She's tougher than she looks." His tone was casual, a shrug in his voice, as if discussing a resilient houseplant. Not rage, not despair. What I felt was a pure, crystalline clarity, as if a lifetime of fog had suddenly lifted. I understood. 35 years of quiet compromises, of swallowed disappointments, of putting his needs first, all dismissed in a single, careless sentence. I watched, frozen in place, as Fiona leaned in, her hand caressing Arthur's cheek, and they shared a passionate kiss, oblivious to the world, to the woman whose life they were so casually dismantling. The kiss was long, deep, a public display of private intimacy that confirmed every unspoken fear, every nagging doubt. When their lips finally parted, I stepped out from the deep shadows, the rustle of my dress a soft whisper in the silence I brought with me. They sprang apart, startled, eyes wide with horror and guilt. Arthur's face went white. Fiona's a mottled crimson. "Well," I said, my voice eerily calm, the words precise, each one landing with the weight of a stone. "This is interesting. Do carry on. Enjoy yourselves." I turned on my heel, leaving them gaping, their faces contorted in a mixture of shock and mortification. I hadn't taken more than a few steps before I heard a new voice. A familiar voice, filled with cheerful confusion. "Arthur, Fiona. There you are. I thought you'd gone to the dance floor with Eleanor. Liam. Dear." Trusting Liam, he stopped short, his brow furrowed, taking in the scene. Arthur and Fiona, standing awkwardly apart, their faces still etched with panic, and me, walking away with an unnerving composure. His confusion slowly morphed into dawning horror. "Eleanor?" Liam called, his voice now laced with fear. "What's going on?" I didn't stop, but I heard his desperate question directed at the two figures he had loved and trusted. "How long?" There was no answer, only a suffocating silence from Arthur and Fiona. But Liam didn't need one. I heard the sharp intake of his breath, the shattered understanding in his sudden stillness. I walked back to him, taking his arm. He looked at me, his eyes brimming with pain, a mirror of my own. "I know, sweetheart," I whispered, my voice soft, comforting, yet firm with a new resolve. Neither did I until tonight. As I led him away, leaving the two traitors behind, my mind was already racing, forming a blueprint for a future they could never have conceived. The remaining days of the cruise passed in a blur of forced civility and strained silence. Liam and I spent our time in quiet companionship, a shared understanding solidifying between us, a bond born of mutual betrayal. We spoke little of what we had witnessed, allowing the shock and anger to marinate, to transform into something more potent. On the last night, as the ship cut through the moonlit waves, heading towards our return to a life that would never be the same, I finally made the call. I slipped away to a quiet corner, the satellite connection humming. "Miles," I said, my voice steady, betraying none of the turmoil that had raged within me for days. "It's Eleanor. Yes, it's time." The words felt powerful. A declaration. I hung up, a strange sense of liberation washing over me. Later that night, as I stood before the full-length mirror in our cabin, the soft glow of the bedside lamp illuminating my reflection, I saw not just a 63-year-old woman, her face lined with the passage of time and the weight of a life lived for others. I saw the glint in her eyes, the stubborn set of her jaw. I saw the fight within her, rekindled, fierce. It was time indeed. Time for Eleanor to finally live her own real life. The drive home from the port was a silent tableau of simmering emotions. The four of us, Eleanor, Arthur, Liam, and Fiona, occupied the spacious car, yet the distance between us felt vast and insurmountable. The air thrummed with unspoken accusations, unaddressed betrayals, and the heavy weight of lives irrevocably altered. Arthur, usually loquacious, stared out the window, his jaw clenched. Fiona, huddled in the back seat beside him, dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, though no tears seemed to fall. Liam, beside me in the front passenger seat, radiated a quiet fury, his hands clasped tightly between his knees. I, however, felt a strange sense of peace. My gaze drifted over the familiar landscape flashing past the window, a canvas of green fields and scattered farmhouses. Arthur had called me tough. He had dismissed me, assuming I would simply survive. He had no idea how thoroughly he had underestimated me, how his casual cruelty had only ignited a steel core I barely knew I possessed. For years, I had been the compliant wife, the supportive partner, the woman who smoothed over edges and silently endured. That woman was gone. In her place sat a strategist, a quiet architect of a future that would shake them to their core. We pulled into Liam and Fiona's driveway first, a mutual agreement made in grim silence. The moment the car stopped, Liam swung the door open, his movements swift and determined. He walked directly to Fiona's side of the car, his face a mask of controlled rage. He didn't raise his voice, but his words cut through the suffocating silence like a scalpel. "Pack your things, Fiona," he stated, his voice devoid of any warmth, any trace of the adoration he had once held for her. "Be gone by tomorrow morning," Fiona gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Liam, please, let me explain," she stammered, scrambling out of the car, her eyes darting frantically between Liam and Arthur. Her face crumpled, attempting a plea for mercy she had not afforded me. "There's nothing to explain," Liam interrupted, his gaze unyielding, freezing her in place. The explanation was quite clear on the cruise. "I suggest you start packing." He turned his back on her, his posture rigid with finality, and walked away, leaving her looking utterly lost, her carefully constructed world crumbling around her. Arthur, meanwhile, had gotten out of the car and moved around to my side. He hesitated, then cleared his throat. "Eleanor," he began, his voice a low, placating rumble, an attempt at the charm that had once captivated me. "We need to talk about this." He gestured vaguely between us, the unspoken mess of our lives. I met his gaze, my expression calm, unreadable. "We should discuss later, Arthur," I replied, my voice as level as a still pond. "I need some time to process all of this." I knew he expected tears, hysterics, or at the very least, a wounded outburst. Instead, he found only a quiet, impenetrable wall. My calm was a weapon, disarming him, leaving him uncertain how to proceed. It bought me precious time to execute the plan I had been meticulously refining in the depths of my mind. Leaving him bewildered on the pavement, I walked into our silent house. The familiar objects, the photographs, the furniture, they all seemed to mock me with their normalcy. I bypassed the living room, the kitchen, heading straight for my study, a small, oak-paneled sanctuary where I kept my books, my journals, and my quiet thoughts. I closed the door behind me, the soft click echoing in the stillness. My hands, which had felt steady and resolute until now, trembled slightly as I reached for the phone. I took a deep, fortifying breath, pushing the last vestiges of doubt and pain to the recesses of my mind. It was time to make the call. Miles Harding, my attorney, answered on the second ring, his familiar, professional voice a welcome anchor. "Miles, it's Eleanor," I said, my voice firmer than I expected. "Eleanor, back from your anniversary cruise, I presume?" "How was it?" he asked, his tone cheerful, unsuspecting. "It was illuminating." "Miles," I replied, a dry edge to my words. "More than you can imagine. I'm afraid I have some rather urgent news, and some revelations, both for you and about Arthur." I briefly recounted the scene in the alcove, Arthur's casual dismissal of me, the passionate kiss. Miles listened in shocked silence, only interjecting with a soft, "My God, Eleanor." Then, I delivered the real bombshell. "But that's not all, Miles. I have something else to tell you. Something I've been keeping quiet for the past 3 months." I paused, allowing the gravity of my words to sink in. "Do you remember 5 years ago, when we restructured Arthur's business and our personal assets? For tax purposes, we put everything into my name, for tax efficiency, as the primary owner and beneficiary of record." "Yes, of course, I remember," Miles said, his voice now cautious. "It was a standard, if somewhat aggressive, strategy for tax mitigation, all perfectly legal, given your long-standing marriage." "Precisely," I confirmed. "Well, that foresight, as you might call it, is about to become rather useful. Miles, I hired a private investigator 3 months ago, a man named David Miller. He's very discreet. He's been tracking Arthur." Another stunned silence from Miles. "Eleanor, what are you saying?" "I'm saying," I articulated, each word a hammer blow, "that Arthur has been cheating on me for years. Not just with Fiona. Fiona is merely the latest. David has provided me with irrefutable evidence. Photographs, hotel receipts, timelines. of multiple affairs, stretching back almost a decade. Arthur's infidelity is serial. Miles. Fiona is just the most recent in a long line of women. Miles let out a slow breath. Eleanor, why didn't you tell me? Because I was waiting for the right moment, I explained. The cool, strategic part of my brain fully engaged. I needed to be absolutely certain, and I needed the final, undeniable public confirmation that the cruise so generously provided. It's not just about a straying husband now, Miles. It's about a man who has systematically disrespected and deceived me for years, while living off assets legally held in my name. So, what do you want me to do? Miles asked, his voice now entirely professional. The shock giving way to a lawyer's focus. I want you to file for divorce immediately, I instructed, my voice unwavering. And I want everything. The house, the company, all the investments, the vacation home, everything that is legally in my name. I want it all. There was a moment of hesitation from Miles. Eleanor? Are you sure? This is a very aggressive stance. At your age, pursuing such a comprehensive claim, it could be a long, arduous battle. Miles, I cut him off, a hint of steel entering my tone. I'm 63, not 90. I have plenty of life left to live, and I intend to live it on my own terms, with the financial security that is rightfully mine, and that Arthur tried to casually discard. Do you understand? Yes, Eleanor. Miles said, his voice now firm with comprehension. I understand perfectly. I'll get to work immediately. The quiet hum of the house settled around me as I sat in my study. The faint scent of old books and polished wood, a comforting presence. My gaze drifted to the framed family photographs on the mantelpiece. A younger Arthur, handsome and vibrant, holding my hand on our wedding day. A son kissed me, laughing with a toddler Liam on a beach vacation. Arthur, Liam, Fiona, and myself, taken just a few years ago, all smiles and apparent harmony. The images mocked me with their innocence, a poignant reminder of the elaborate facade we had all maintained. A life built on a foundation of unspoken truths and hidden betrayals. Upstairs, I could hear Arthur moving about, his footsteps heavy and deliberate. Fiona's voice, a hushed murmur, occasionally drifted down, sounding strangely out of place in my home. She must have come back with Arthur from Liam's house, perhaps seeking refuge or a final conversation. The thought brought a grim smile to my lips. Their desperate scrambling was almost pitiful. A few minutes later, I heard the distinctive sound of Liam's car pulling out of their driveway across the street, the engine fading into the night. My heart ached for him, for the quiet dignity with which he had faced his own betrayal. The next morning dawned with a pale, uncertain light filtering through the curtains. I was already in the kitchen, a freshly brewed pot of coffee filling the air with its rich aroma. Arthur appeared in the doorway, looking thoroughly disheveled. His usually impeccably styled hair was rumpled, his shirt wrinkled, his eyes bloodshot. He looked like a man who hadn't slept, haunted by the events of the previous night. Eleanor, he began, his voice rough. We need to talk. He sounded wary, uncertain of my reaction, yet still attempting to assert some semblance of control. I turned from the coffee maker, calmly pouring myself a cup, the delicate ceramic warm in my hands. Good morning, Arthur, I replied, my voice smooth, even. I offered him a cup, observing him over the rim of my own. Coffee? He ignored the offer, his gaze intense. Look, about what happened on the ship. He started, a familiar pattern of denial already forming in his eyes. I cut him off, my voice steady. What I think, Arthur, is that you've been having an affair with our son's wife, my best friend, for quite some time it seems. The color drained from his face, leaving it pasty and drawn. His jaw clenched, and his eyes, usually so full of a calculated charm, now flickered with panic. Eleanor, it's not what you think. Oh, but it is, Arthur, I stated, a cool certainty in my tone. I heard you talking on the ship. I heard everything. How convenient the anniversary cruise was for your plans. How you dismissed me, saying Eleanor will survive. She always does. She's tougher than she looks. And then, of course, the rather passionate kiss. I watched him closely, savoring the slow dawning of realization in his eyes. He hadn't known I had heard them. He had assumed his little secret was safe. He looked away, running a hand through his already messy hair. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this, Eleanor," he mumbled, the words heavy with self-pity, implying he had envisioned a more controlled, more favorable narrative for himself. He wanted to break the news on his own terms, perhaps in a way that minimized his culpability and maximized his gain. "No," I countered, a wry smile touching my lips. "I'm sure it wasn't. It never is for you, is it, Arthur? When things don't go precisely according to your grand designs, after you'd figured out how to take half of everything in the divorce? Perhaps?" His head snapped up, his eyes widening in genuine shock. "What are you talking about?" he stammered, completely blindsided. "What do you know?" I took another sip of coffee, allowing the silence to stretch, to amplify his growing discomfort. Then, I lowered the cup, meeting his gaze squarely. "Who actually owns everything, Arthur?" I asked, my voice soft, but laced with a razor's edge. The question hung in the air, a chilling echo. He stared at me, his mind racing, his expression shifting from confusion to a sickening understanding. I watched as the color drained from his face for a second time, leaving him looking utterly hollow. The implication of the asset restructuring we had undertaken 5 years prior, the one he had proudly orchestrated for tax efficiency, slammed into him with the force of a physical blow. The company, the house, the investments, the vacation home. All of it, legally, was in my name. His name was on nothing. "Eleanor," he said slowly, his voice barely a whisper, a terrifying realization dawning in his eyes. "What did you do?" I smiled, a genuine, if somewhat cold, smile. "I didn't do anything, darling," I replied, my voice dripping with honeyed irony. "You did it all yourself." Just then, Fiona appeared in the kitchen doorway, her large suitcase beside her, her expression a mix of trepidation and curiosity. She looked rumpled, her face blotchy, clearly having had a difficult night. "Arthur," she said, her voice small. "What's going on?" I heard raised voices. "Is everything all right?" She seemed utterly oblivious to the true nature of the conversation she was interrupting. Arthur turned his head, looking first at Fiona, then back at me. His eyes, now wide with a dawning horror, darted between his mistress, standing cluelessly with her luggage, and his wife, serene and unyielding, holding all the cards. In that moment, the full, devastating weight of his situation crashed down on him. His perfect plan to escape his marriage with a new love and half the assets had just become his perfect nightmare. A little over 24 hours after Miles had promised to move swiftly, my phone rang. It was him, his voice tinged with a distinct amusement I rarely heard. "Eleanor," he began, trying to sound serious but failing. "Arthur just received the papers. He called me, rather unhinged I might add. He used some rather choice language to describe you. A conniving witch was among the milder terms. A genuine, unbidden thrill of satisfaction snaked through me. I leaned back in my chair, a faint smile playing on my lips. "Did he?" "Now," I mused, the calm in my voice, a stark contrast to the storm I imagined brewing in Arthur. "Indeed," Miles chuckled. "He's absolutely furious, demanding to know what you've done." I simply informed him that the divorce petition outlined the legal ownership of all assets, as per the agreements we drafted and he signed years ago. He was speechless. For once, Miles's voice sobered slightly. "Eleanor, I need you to understand. This is a clean sweep. Everything. The house, the company, all investments, the vacation home. It's all in your name, legally. He has no claim to any of it. He is, to put it mildly, completely devastated financially." The words resonated deep within me, echoing a silent victory. For years, Arthur had prided himself on his business acumen, his shrewd financial dealings. He had often subtly, sometimes not so subtly, dismissed my intelligence, treating my law school background as a quaint hobby rather than a serious pursuit. He had underestimated me at every turn, assuming my quiet demeanor equated to a lack of understanding or ambition. That perception, it turned out, was his gravest error. He had forged the very chains that now bound him, proudly signing the documents that sealed his own financial ruin. "Good," I said, the single word conveying a depth of feeling I usually kept hidden. "Are you prepared for this to get ugly, Eleanor?" Miles asked, his voice now entirely serious. "Because it will. He won't go down without a fight, not when his entire life is on the line." My gaze drifted to the window, to the quiet street outside. "I'm ready, Miles," I asserted, my voice firm, unwavering. More ready than I've ever been. Later that afternoon, the doorbell chimed, a hesitant, almost timid sound. I glanced through the peephole. It was Fiona, looking utterly terrible. Her usually immaculate hair was a mess, her designer clothes crumpled, and her eyes were swollen and red. She looked like she had been crying for hours, a stark contrast to the carefully curated image she always presented. I opened the door, my expression neutral. "Eleanor," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "Can we talk, please?" I stepped aside, allowing her to enter. She moved awkwardly into the living room, her eyes darting around as if seeing the space for the first time. She sat on the edge of the sofa, wringing her hands, tears welling up in her eyes again. "I'm so sorry, Eleanor," she choked out, her voice filled with what she hoped was remorse. "I truly am. I never meant for any of this to happen." I remained standing, observing her with a detached curiosity. "Do I seem angry to you, Fiona?" I asked, my voice calm, almost conversational. She blinked, surprised by my composure. "Well, no. But you have every right to be. I betrayed you. Both of you." Betrayal implies a level of emotional investment that, frankly, I no longer possess when it comes to Arthur, I stated plainly. "And as for you, I suppose I'm more disappointed than angry. But, let's be honest, Fiona. Nothing just happens. Things don't just escalate into long-term affairs and plans to run away together. You made choices. Arthur made choices. Both of you. But it was a connection, Eleanor," she insisted, clutching at straws, attempting to romanticize her actions. A real connection that I hadn't felt in so long. With Arthur, I let out a short, mirthless laugh. "A connection to his bank account, you mean," I retorted, cutting her off cleanly. "Let me enlighten you, Fiona. Your connection to Arthur is now entirely moot. He doesn't own any of this. Not this house, not the company, not his supposed investments, not even the vacation home you were planning your romantic escape to. It's all mine, every single penny." "Legally," Fiona stared at me, her mouth agape. Her carefully constructed facade of remorse crumbled instantly, replaced by sheer disbelief, then dawning horror. "That's impossible," she whispered, her voice a strangled sound. "But he said, he told me he was going to divorce you, and we'd build a new life with his money. He said he had plenty. He said he was rich, and he was," I clarified, my voice unwavering, "until 5 years ago when, for tax purposes, he signed over all ownership to me. A very clever financial maneuver, he called it. The joke, it seems, is on him, and on you." I watched her face, the transformation complete. The fake tears, the contrived remorse, it all vanished, replaced by a cold, calculating fury. "So, congratulations, Fiona," I concluded, a chilling finality in my tone. "You didn't get yourself a wealthy new start. You got yourself a 67-year-old man with no assets, no income, and no prospects. I sincerely hope the sex was worth it." Her eyes narrowed, the last vestiges of her victim act gone. "He won't go down without a fight, Eleanor," she warned, her voice now sharp, tinged with a venomous anger. "Arthur will make your life a living hell." I simply raised an eyebrow. "Perhaps," I acknowledged, unfazed. "But he'll be doing it from a much less comfortable position. If you're finding this story as gripping as I hope, please remember to like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss out on what happens next. Your support truly helps bring these narratives to life." After Fiona's defeated departure, the house felt quiet, almost echoing with the residual tension. My first instinct was to reach out to Liam. I found his number in my contacts and called, my heart aching with a familiar maternal tenderness. His voice, when he answered, was tired, almost defeated. "Hey, Mom," he mumbled, a weariness I hadn't heard before coloring his tone. "Liam, it's Mom," I said gently, my voice soft. "I just wanted to check in. I also wanted to let you know that I've filed for divorce." The words felt stark, liberating, yet painful to utter to my son. A reminder of the shattered illusion of our family. He was silent for a long moment, then a shaky sigh escaped him. I feel like such an idiot." "Mom," he confessed, his voice heavy with self-reproach. "How could I not have seen it? My own wife, my own father." "Liam," I interrupted softly, "don't you dare blame yourself. You trusted them. That speaks to your character, not to any failing on your part. They were the ones who betrayed that trust. What matters now is that you found the strength to walk away, to protect yourself." "He called," Liam continued, ignoring my reassurance, his voice raw. "Arthur called me, wants to explain everything." I just told him I had nothing to say, and hung up. There was a firmness in his tone then, a flicker of the steel I hoped he would find within himself. "Good for you, son," I affirmed, a warmth spreading through me. "I just feel empty, Mom," he admitted, his voice barely a whisper. "Like everything I thought I knew about my family was a lie. About all of us." "It's not all a lie, sweetheart," I reassured him, my heart aching for the pain in his voice. "I love you. That's never been a lie. And I always will. We'll get through this, you and I, together." He didn't respond immediately, but I felt a subtle shift, a faint hope rekindling in his silence. We spoke for a few more minutes, mostly about mundane things, a quiet comfort passing between us. The next morning, I dressed with purpose. A tailored navy pantsuit, a crisp white blouse, and my most authoritative heels. It had been 5 years since I had last set foot in Hartwell Industries, the successful manufacturing company Arthur had built. Or, rather, that we had built together, with my legal expertise silently underpinning its foundation. He had always been the face, the charismatic leader, while I handled the intricate legal frameworks, the contracts, the strategic asset placements that made it all possible. After Liam was born, I gradually stepped back, focusing on our home, our son, trusting Arthur with the company we had created. A mistake I wouldn't be repeating. I drove the familiar route, the imposing glass and steel building rising against the morning sky. Inside, the reception area was bustling. The young receptionist, a girl I vaguely recognized from years ago, looked up, her smile faltering when she saw me. She knew me as Mrs. Hartwell, the wife. "Good morning," I said, my voice clear and firm. "I'm Eleanor Hartwell." Her eyes widened slightly. "Mrs. Hartwell. Is Mr. Hartwell expecting you?" "No," I replied, a small, knowing smile playing on my lips. "He isn't. I'm here to see the books. All of them. And I'm here to take command. I'm the owner of this company." Her jaw dropped. She stammered for a moment, then scrambled to her feet. "Of course, Mrs. Hartwell. Right away. Who should I inform?" "First, get me the chief financial officer," I instructed, my voice leaving no room for argument. "And then, I want a company-wide meeting called for this afternoon, 2 o'clock, in the main conference room. Everyone." The CFO, a nervous-looking man named Richard, met me shortly after, ushering me into Arthur's expansive office, which suddenly felt incredibly small. The financial documents, years of them, were laid out on the gleaming mahogany desk. I spent the next few hours poring over them, my lawyer's brain re-engaging with a fierce precision, absorbing every detail, every line item. At precisely 2 o'clock, I walked into the main conference room. 23 employees, from various departments, were already seated, their faces a mixture of confusion and apprehension. They had undoubtedly expected Arthur, perhaps a hastily called meeting about a new project, or a crisis. Instead, they found me, Eleanor Hartwell, standing at the head of the table, dressed powerfully, radiating an unexpected authority. "Good afternoon, everyone," I began, my voice clear and commanding, carrying effortlessly across the room. "For those of you who don't know me, I'm Eleanor Hartwell, and I own this company." A collective murmur rippled through the room. Julia, from accounting, a timid woman who had been with the company for decades, tentatively raised her hand. "Mrs. Hartwell," she began, her voice quivering slightly. "Is Mr. Hartwell? Is he ill?" "No, Julia," I answered, my gaze sweeping over their anxious faces. "Arthur is not ill. Arthur is getting divorced, and as of this morning, he is no longer involved in the management or ownership of Hartwell Industries." The silence that followed was absolute, punctuated only by a few gasps. Their faces registered shock, dismay, and then, slowly, a glimmer of understanding. "I understand this comes as a shock," I continued, projecting confidence. "And I want to assure each of you that your jobs are secure. Hartwell Industries will continue to thrive. However, there will be changes in management. The culture of the company, and its direction, has been, shall we say, less than transparent at the top. That ends now." My eyes met theirs, a silent promise and a firm declaration in my gaze. The conference room was buzzing with a nervous energy after my announcement. Then, Mark, the head of sales, a man who had always been Arthur's loyal lieutenant, cleared his throat. He was a gruff, imposing figure, his face etched with skepticism. "Mrs. Hartwell," he began, his tone respectful yet challenging. "With all due respect, Mr. Hartwell has been at the helm of this company for 35 years. He built it. He knows its inner workings, its clients, its every nuance. Do you truly believe you can step in and run a company of this magnitude?" I met his gaze, unflinching. "Mark, I appreciate your candor," I replied, my voice calm but firm. "And you are correct. Arthur has been the visible face of Hartwell Industries, but for every success he claimed, there was a foundation of meticulous planning and financial strategy laid by me. As for the inner workings you speak of, let's discuss some of them." I motioned to Richard, the CFO, who nervously projected a series of spreadsheets onto the screen. "Mark, can you tell me the status of our contract with Meridian Logistics?" I asked. "The one Arthur secured 8 years ago? The one that accounts for nearly 30% of our quarterly revenue?" Mark shifted, clearly uncomfortable. "Well, Mrs. Hartwell, it's under review. Arthur was just about to. It expires in 3 months, Mark," I interjected, my voice sharp, "and it hasn't been reviewed or renegotiated in over a year. Meridian Logistics has been openly soliciting bids from our competitors for the last 6 months, a fact that seems to have entirely escaped Arthur's attention. Or perhaps his focus was elsewhere." A subtle murmur went through the room. I continued, itemizing with devastating precision. "And what about the impending patent expiration on our core manufacturing process? The one that gives us our market advantage? Arthur was supposed to have initiated the renewal process, or developed alternatives, over 2 years ago. We are now dangerously close to losing exclusivity. These are not minor oversights, Mark. These are critical failures that could jeopardize the entire future of this company. This isn't just about stepping in, it's about damage control and securing our future. Something Arthur has evidently neglected for quite some time." I spent the next hour dissecting Arthur's recent performance, using the detailed financial records and internal memos I had reviewed that morning. I exposed his neglect of major clients, the expiring contracts, the missed investment opportunities, all while demonstrating an encyclopedic knowledge of the company's true state. I revealed how I had secretly been monitoring the company's health for months, anticipating this very confrontation. By the time I finished, the skepticism in the room had been replaced by a quiet respect and a dawning understanding of just how much Arthur had let slide. Later that evening, as I was calmly chopping vegetables for a simple dinner, the back door burst open. Arthur stormed into the kitchen, his face contorted with a mixture of rage and disbelief. "What the hell do you think you're doing, Eleanor?" he roared, slamming the door shut. "Invading my company? Threatening my employees? Who do you think you are? I didn't flinch. I continued to slice a cucumber with deliberate, unhurried movements. I think I'm the owner of Hartwell Industries, Arthur, I replied, my voice serene, almost bored, and as such, I'm simply ensuring its continued viability. After all, it's my company. My company, he scoffed, his voice rising. I built that business from the ground up. I poured my life into it. I finally set down my knife and turned to face him, a faint, condescending smile on my lips. Oh, did you, darling? Do you remember who co-signed the initial loan? When no bank would touch your revolutionary idea? Do you remember whose inheritance provided the initial startup capital that allowed you to even dream of building it? Who spent countless nights poring over legal documents, ensuring every contract was watertight, every asset protected? I paused, letting the words hang in the air. You were my partner in name, but I was your wife then, Arthur. There's a difference, and I have the legal documents to prove who ultimately owns it. His bluster faltered, his shoulders slumping slightly. A fleeting look of something akin to remorse crossed his face. Eleanor, I know I messed up. I know I was wrong. Yes, Arthur, I acknowledged, my voice devoid of emotion. You did. And now, it's too late. He took a step towards me, a desperate plea in his eyes. No, it's not. Please, we can fix this. I'll end things with Fiona, I swear. I'll do anything. Just don't do this to me. Don't take everything. I let out a short, incredulous laugh. End things with Fiona? Oh, Arthur, you truly haven't changed. This isn't about Fiona. She's just a symptom of a much larger character flaw. And besides, I added, my eyes narrowing, I know all about your secret downtown apartment, the one you've been paying for with company funds. The one Fiona moved into yesterday, I believe. Very efficient of her. His face paled, all remaining color draining away. His jaw went slack, his eyes wide with a mixture of shock and utter defeat. He sagged against the countertop, the air knocked out of him. How did you know? He whispered, his voice broken. I know everything, Arthur, I stated, my voice cold, hard. I've known for months. I just waited for the right time to make my move. He stood there, a broken man, his empire crumbling around him. What do you want from me? He finally asked, his voice barely audible. What do I want from you? I repeated, a dangerous glint in my eyes. I want you to experience consequences for the first time in your adult life. Real, tangible consequences. Tomorrow morning, I announced, picking up my knife again. The locks on this house will be changed, and all your company credit cards will be canceled. Consider this your new reality. The phone rang shortly after Arthur had stormed out, leaving behind a faint scent of his expensive cologne and the lingering sting of his shock. It was Liam, his voice a mix of bewilderment and something almost like admiration. Mom, he began. What's going on? Really? I heard about the meeting at the company today. And Mark called me, talking about Dad being out. What did you do? I smiled softly into the phone. Liam, your father made some rather grand assumptions, I explained, choosing my words carefully. Assumptions about our marriage, about our finances, about his own importance. He built a narrative, and I simply allowed it to play out until the opportune moment. I then shared the details of the asset restructuring, the private investigator, and Arthur's complete lack of legal ownership. There was a stunned silence on the other end. Then, Liam exhaled slowly. Wow. Just, wow. Mom. He paused. Fiona called me, you know, crying. Said Dad had lied to her about everything, about his money. Said she never would have left me if she'd known he was going to lose everything. His voice hardened. She tried to reconcile. Mom, tried to tell me it was all a mistake. That she missed me. And what did you say? I asked, a knot of worry forming in my stomach. Despite everything, Fiona was his wife, and the pain of that betrayal ran deep. I told her that ship had sailed, Liam replied, his voice firm, resolute. I told her she made her bed, and now she had to lie in it. I told her I deserved better than a liar and a cheat. She hung up on me. A wave of relief washed over me. My son was stronger than I had given him credit for. I'm proud of you, Liam, I said, a genuine warmth spreading through me. Dad's been bragging to everyone about his success for years. Mom, Liam continued, a note of wonder in his voice, and none of it was ever his. That's kind of brilliant. What you did. It was just self-preservation, darling, I corrected him gently. And foresight. Something your father always lacked when it truly mattered. We talked for a while longer. A newfound closeness solidifying between us. A shared understanding born of the very betrayals that had torn us apart. Arthur returned later that night, after I had already retired to bed. I heard his footsteps, unusually quiet, in the kitchen. He opened the door to my study, where I was reading, a habit I had picked up again recently. His shoulders were slumped, his face pale and drawn. He looked utterly defeated, a shadow of the man who had roared at me hours earlier. Fiona left me, he confessed, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. She said I was a liar and a fraud. She packed her bags and left. I closed my book, placing it gently on my lap. Did she now? I asked, my voice calm. Funny how quickly loyalty fades when the purse strings are cut, isn't it, Arthur? He sighed, running a hand over his face. I thought she loved me. You loved the idea of her, Arthur. I corrected him, my voice devoid of malice, simply stating a truth. The feeling of being young and powerful again, of being desired by a younger woman. Fiona simply loved the idea of your money. Neither of you ever truly saw the other. He looked at me then, a flicker of something raw and exposed in his eyes. Maybe you're right, he admitted, his voice barely a whisper. Maybe I am, I agreed. Now you get to figure out who you are without the trappings of wealth and status. And you should probably figure it out quickly. Because the world is about to look very different for you. That night, for the first time in 35 years, I slept alone in our king-sized bed. The silence was not empty. It was peaceful. The absence of his familiar presence beside me brought not loneliness, but a profound sense of liberation. I stretched out, taking up the entire space, feeling the cool sheets against my skin, finally breathing a sigh of true contentment. Months passed. The divorce was finalized swiftly, without the protracted, ugly battle Miles had predicted. Arthur, stripped of his assets and his legal standing, had no leverage, no fight left in him. He signed the papers with a quiet resignation, a broken man. I settled into my new role as the CEO of Hartwell Industries, learning the ropes, restructuring departments, and injecting a fresh, ethical vision into the company. Liam, after a period of healing, had found a new strength, pursuing a passion he had long suppressed, enrolling in a culinary arts program, and finding joy in creating something with his own hands. One afternoon, I ran into Pamela Davies at the grocery store, a woman who reveled in local gossip. She immediately launched into a hushed, dramatic account of Arthur's downfall. "Eleanor, have you heard about Arthur?" she whispered, her eyes wide with a morbid fascination. "He's living in some awful extended-stay motel across town. Looks absolutely dreadful, I hear. So rough. Isn't that just awful? You must feel terrible for him." I calmly placed a bag of organic apples into my cart. "Pamela," I said, my voice even, "Arthur's current situation is a series of choices Arthur made for himself. I merely provided the framework for those choices to have their natural consequences." I offered her a polite, unyielding smile, effectively ending the conversation. I felt no guilt, no remorse, only a quiet satisfaction in the justice of it all. Other social calls confirmed the swift and brutal nature of Arthur's fall from grace. He had indeed lost everything, including Fiona, who, it turned out, had wasted no time in finding a new, wealthier benefactor. The whispers in our social circle painted a picture of a man utterly alone, stripped bare of all the things he had valued most: his wealth, his status, his mistresses, The new rhythm of my life was a comforting melody, punctuated by progress and purpose. Liam called me frequently, his voice lighter, filled with a newfound clarity. One day, he recounted an unsettling conversation. "Mom," he started, a hesitant note in his voice. "Arthur called again. He's been calling, asking for money. Said he's struggling. I told him no. Politely, but firmly." He paused, as if bracing for my reaction. "Good, Liam," I affirmed, my heart swelling with pride. "You did the right thing." "I told him he made his choices," Liam continued, his voice strengthening. "And now, he has to live with them." He got angry, of course. But I just hung up. "I've been talking to a therapist, Mom. She helps me sort through all the mess. I feel pity for him, I guess. But I also know it's not my responsibility to bail him out. I have my own life to build now." His words echoed my own sentiments. A testament to his maturity and healing. The ripples of Arthur's and Fiona's downfall extended into the farthest corners of our social circle. Mary, my hairdresser, a fount of local gossip, delivered the latest updates with a knowing look. "You won't believe it, Eleanor," she confided during my next appointment, snipping expertly at my hair. "Fiona, the glamorous Fiona, I saw her last week. She's waitressing at that truck stop diner out on Highway 7. Looked absolutely miserable, and she was apparently crying to anyone who'd listen about how Arthur was her biggest mistake. Said she should have known better." Mary chuckled, a sound of grim satisfaction. "Funny how quickly love vanishes when the money does, isn't it?" Mary then brightened, a genuine smile replacing her gossipy smirk. "Oh, and Eleanor, I saw Liam last weekend. He was with a lovely young woman named Jessica. So sweet. She's a teacher, apparently. They seemed very happy. A warmth spread through me." That was the news that truly mattered. Even Arthur's former golf buddies, men who had once hung on his every boast, were now filled with a strange admiration for me. Trevor Jones, a man Arthur had once dismissed as a little slow on the uptake, approached me at a charity gala, his eyes wide with astonishment. "Eleanor," he exclaimed, shaking my hand with an unexpected fervor. "I just can't believe it. All those years, listening to Arthur brag about Hartwell Industries, about his genius, his empire, and it was your company the whole time. You owned it, secretly. That's absolutely incredible." I simply smiled, a quiet triumph in my gaze. "Arthur always preferred to be the one in the spotlight, Trevor," I said gently. I merely allowed him his stage. Not long after, Liam encountered Arthur himself. He described the encounter with a heavy heart. "I was getting coffee, Mom," he recounted, and there he was, Arthur, on the street corner, in worn clothes, holding a sign. "Panhandling." Liam's voice cracked slightly. He saw me. His eyes, they just looked so hollow. He asked me for $20. "And what did you do?" I asked, my breath catching in my throat. I looked him right in the eye. "Mom," Liam said, his voice firm, and I told him, "Sorry doesn't undo the damage, Arthur." And I walked away. It hurt, Mom. It really did. But I couldn't. I just couldn't. Another wave of pride washed over me. Liam had truly found his own strength, his own moral compass, unclouded by the shadow of his father's expectations or his mother's pain. My own life continued to flourish. I found solace and joy in the simple act of nurturing my garden, watching life unfurl from seed to blossom. The quiet hours spent tending to my roses, my herbs, brought a profound sense of peace, a metaphor for the new life I was cultivating for myself. Evenings were often spent with Liam and Jessica, their genuine laughter and easy affection filling my home with a warmth it had lacked for decades. One afternoon, I received an email from Sophia Green, a journalist from the Herald Tribune. She was writing a feature on successful female entrepreneurs over 60, women who had found their calling later in life. She had heard about my turnaround of Hartwell Industries, about the quiet, unexpected strength I had demonstrated. The article, when it came out, painted a picture of resilience, intelligence, and grace under pressure. I became, Much to my surprise, a quiet role model, an inspiration to other women finding their voices and their power later in life. A year after the cruise, Liam married Jessica in my blossoming garden, surrounded by close friends and family, a tableau of genuine love and heartfelt celebration. There were no false smiles, no hidden agendas, as I watched my son, radiant with happiness, exchange vows with his sweet, kind wife. A deep, abiding satisfaction settled in my soul. This was the family, the life I had always deserved. Arthur and Fiona, meanwhile, faded into the background of our lives. They became cautionary tales, footnotes in other people's stories, their selfish betrayals reduced to whispers and rumors. They were no longer characters in my narrative. My story, Eleanor's story, was one of peace, genuine connection, and an entirely self-made life, forged in the crucible of betrayal, but ultimately defined by triumphant self-discovery.